Well, welcome to our last section of our Bless book, The Final S. Great to have you with us tonight. I'm going to hand over to Dave, who is going to share all about story. We can't spell bless without two S's, so we need the last one tonight. So look forward to hearing what he's got to say and then discussing later on. Over to Dave. Thanks, Dave.
Hi everyone, I'm back with one last part in this little series going through bless, B-L-E-S-S, and the ways that we can bless other people, ways that are shown, that are proven to help us as we try to share the faith that we have with other people. We've thought about beginning with prayer, about listening to people, about eating and drinking with people, about serving them and helping them in ways that are really going to make a difference in their lives. And now we come to the final bit, which is to share our stories with people. It's all about our stories. Now, this could be the bit that you find the scariest. It could be the thing that you find the most difficult. But remember, this isn't just going in cold and going up to some random person and saying, right, I'm going to tell you everything I know about myself and about Jesus. This is about us having built those relationships, having spent time praying for people, having spent time listening to them, having helped them out and become people in their lives who they learn to rely on. Then with those kinds of friendships and relationships, sharing our story and talking about what God has done in our lives actually can become a very natural thing to do. It won't happen overnight. There's a couple of things that can help. One of which is to have a plan. And today, instead of talking about what Jesus did and what I've done and what you can do, I just want to talk more generally about this idea of sharing our stories. I know that in your midweek groups, you're going to be spending time thinking about a time when Jesus talked a little bit about his story and about who he was and about all of those kinds of things. So you'll see that example from Jesus there. I've had lots of opportunities in my life to talk to people and to tell people about the impact God's had on me. Some of those have gone really, really well, and people have sort of understood something of my faith in a way that they'd never seen before. Sometimes people have gone, okay, that's all right for you, and that's been the end of it. So I'm not saying that every single time we share something of God in our lives, we're going to see big results straight away. That's not the point. That's what we hope for, that's what we pray for, but sometimes we just need to share. We just need to be willing to talk about what God has done for us. There are some things that can hold us back from that. I know you're going to spend some time thinking about that in the coming weeks as well. But how do you actually go about sharing your story? Well, let me give you an example. For me, there was a time in my life, back when I was younger, actually when I was around the age of some of you, when I was really, really insecure. I did well at school. I was achieving quite well. I did lots of things that I was good at. I had friends. I wasn't really bullied, but I felt very insecure. I felt as though somehow everyone was going to suddenly realise that I'm not as interesting as they thought I was, or that I'm not as good or as clever or whatever it was. And I was actually very insecure. I thought, I don't really measure up. I looked around at other people and I thought, well, they're all far more interesting and far better than I am. I didn't really like myself. I didn't really feel accepted, and so I spent a lot of my time pretending I was something other than I was. Pretending I was funny, or pretending I was more intelligent, or pretending this, that, or the other. It was like I was putting masks on. Didn't want people to see the real me. Anyway, one of the biggest impacts that God has had on my life is that he's helped me to take off those masks. Because God knows exactly who I am. And when I realised that knowing who I am, God still sent Jesus to die for me, he accepted me. Well, if God can accept me, then maybe I can accept myself a little bit more. And maybe I can hope that other people would as well. It's changed the way that I look at my life. That's an example of a way that you could tell your story. Notice it didn't start with, I used to be the worst and most horrible person in the world, and then I met Jesus and now I'm perfect. That's not what any of our stories are like. We might have dramatic stories of when we came to know Jesus for the first time, but most of us don't. For me, I grew up in a Christian family and I gradually got to know about God, and then when it came to the age of about 11, I decided I needed to make a decision for myself, and I decided I would follow God. That's not very dramatic. I know a lot of you would have a similar kind of story to that. So do you still have a story to tell? Do you still have a story that's worth telling? Well, I think you do. And you can do it a little bit like the way that I did just then, which, if you noticed, was talking about before, what Jesus did, and then after. Now, you could talk about that in terms of the way that you came to faith, the way that you became a Christian, if you have. And you talk about what life was like before you were a Christian, if you can think about a really concrete example of what that was like and how it was different from your life now. And then you talk about how it was you became a Christian, maybe the person who introduced you to him, or the event you were at, or the circumstances that were around that. And then you talk about the impact Jesus has made on your life now, before Jesus and after. Or it could be that instead of talking about it in terms of how you came to faith and how you became a Christian, you talk about it in terms of an event or something that's happened in your life. For me, that might look something like this. A few years ago, I was actually quite seriously depressed. Some really awful things were going on in my life, and I was really struggling, and I didn't really know what to do, and I was becoming depressed, and I was becoming very, very anxious. This is a true story, by the way. I'm not making it up. But what Jesus did for me during that time, by showing me his love, by showing me that in concrete ways of putting people around me who were supporting me, who were loving me, who were caring for me, who were helping me not just slip further and further down, but were helping lift me up higher and higher. Over that time, it didn't happen overnight, but I saw Jesus at work in my life in so many different ways. On the exact evenings when I needed people to get in contact, they did. He provided relationships around me. He provided all kinds of things that I needed. And as a result, I found peace. As a result, I'm no longer depressed. God came through for me in big ways, and it made such a difference in my life. That's not the story of my conversion, but it is the story of my life. It might be a story of a particular time you've gone through, where you can point to what Jesus did and how it's helped. It might be that you can think of something that's a lot smaller and less sort of big and dramatic, but actually just something more recent. A particular answered prayer, or a particular thing that's given you encouragement, maybe during lockdown. You could talk about, if it's true, you could talk about how church or youth groups or Christian friends have been a support to you, because that's part of the work of Jesus in your life. The important thing with any story is that it has a beginning, a middle and an end. And the beginning, middle and end with these kinds of stories is to talk about the situation you're in. That's the beginning. How things started, what was going on. The middle is always going to be something about what God has done, who Jesus is, what he's done. Then the end is going to be what the result is, what life's like since. God loves to change lives. Jesus does it all the time. So what's the story of God in your life? And then the really important thing is to practice. I just sort of rattled off 2 examples of the way that I could tell some of my story. I've talked about that before. I've said those things before, maybe not in those exact words, but in pretty similar ones, because I've practiced. And I've practiced because when the moment comes, you won't necessarily have chance to say, could you wait just a second? I want to go and practice something and then come back. I want to make sure that I'm always ready. I'm always ready to talk about what it is that God's done in my life. And so I've practiced. I've spent time by myself and with other people practicing that and talking about it. So I hope that you have a good time as you think about what stories of God you could tell. That's the end of this bless. B-L-E-S-S finishes with your story, the story of God in your life. If you tell your story, people can't disagree with it. People can't say, well, they could tell you that you're lying, but they're unlikely to. People are going to listen, and people are going to be interested because they're interested in you if they're people that you've built this relationship with. So, practice your stories and then pray for opportunities to tell your stories. Bye, everyone.
Well, that was great. So thank you, Dave, for that. We all have a story to tell, and I don't know whether you've ever thought about your story. I don't know where your faith's at, but tonight we're going to spend some time in our groups now just thinking about it and maybe sharing whatever you want to share, whatever you feel comfortable sharing with each other. It's so important. There are so many people out in the world, our friends, our relatives, our neighbours who don't know Jesus. And we have a story, a great story to tell of how Jesus has changed our life. So I encourage you to join back to Zoom now, and we're going to carry on with the rest of our evening. See you soon.